they're saying, good, finally we'll have an era of less individualism, hyper individualism, they called it, with a greater focus on community and the collective. And another of the experts said that people are going to start to accept restraints on mass consumption and consumer culture. Now, if you just look at from promotion of authoritative experts, support for big government, less individualism, focus on the collective, and accepting restraints on mass consumption, that is Maoism. That is like right out of the Little Red Book of Chairman Mao. And I'm just amazed that we're seeing that play out. But of course, that actually is kind of what we're seeing. It's a Maoist's wet dream is what they're really promoting there. And it was astonishing that they would promote it in such a positive, non-ironic way. But go read the article if you don't believe me. It's absolutely true. And then the last big thing that I noticed here that they were talking about were changes, hopefully, in the healthcare system, hope for nationalizing healthcare and even nationalizing big pharma. I'm like, good luck with that. There are definitely going to be changes to the healthcare system. I think it's going to happen. You're going to see nationalizing very likely. I think we're going to be seeing nationalizing a number of key industries in our society. Anyway, so that was the prediction of Politico. Let's see how it's played out in our society. First thing that I want to point out, I haven't seen anyone talking about this anywhere. So I want to talk about it with you now, is massive risk aversion. My view, this is something that has been very insufficiently discussed as a result of the COVID pandemic. It's not that we don't want to be careful about this virus, particularly in January and February when I was learning about it for the first time. I'm not going to apologize. I was afraid too. The information that was coming to me was you have a virus that's 10 to 20 times deadlier than a flu and spreads 2 to 3 times faster. And that's scary, obviously. And based on that information, a lockdown or at least some type of quarantine effort is a reasonable thing to undertake. I see no reason to think otherwise. Fortunately, we have the ability to learn as things go on, and we have learned that we've completely obliterated our global economy in the process of dealing with this pandemic, and it's the changes that have happened in our global economy. Arguably, and I'm not going to get into this whole thing here, I wasn't prepared, but there have been many arguments that it's actually caused more death than not doing anything at all. That's debatable because we don't know how many people would have died had there been no lockdowns, and you can get into this and discuss it. But the point is that there's been a real toll that has been taken on our global economy. But what you can see is that there's been tremendous risk aversion. What probably many of us have learned is that there have been pandemics in the recent past. There was the avian flu of the 1950s. There was SARS just 12 years ago. And there have been other pandemics throughout the 20th century, Spanish flu, of course, 100 years ago. And none of them resulted in a shutdown of society because we were not as risk averse as we are today. And we are more risk averse today because our society is changing. And our society is changing because psychologically we're going through changes due to moving into this fourth stage of humanity, this transhumanist stage, which involves more risk aversion. And I think this is what we're seeing now. So the risk aversion makes us a more fragile, much more brittle society than ever before. So that is my argument on that. So yeah, risk aversion, we've really seen that play out and accelerate. And we're going to see it more and more. Emphasis on safety over all else, to the exclusion or to the detriment, especially of all other considerations of society. Another thing that we're seeing, and boy, are we seeing this big time, is a centralization of political authority due to this pandemic. Yes, everyone can see with the lockdown and the curfews. I mean, if that's not a massive extension of political authority, then I don't know what is. You can argue, well, that's just temporary. It's going to go back. But that's a really debatable point. And the fact is that once we have the example of massive lockdowns and curfews for something like this, we're going to be seeing them for other types of excuses in the future. You mark my words. Now, the protests and riots that have been happening as a result of the horrific killing of George Floyd a little over a week ago, that is a horrible thing that we are out now all dealing with. And arguably, and I don't know if we're going to be able to prove this one way or the other, but a lot of this I think we can attribute to the stress that was already very, very deeply felt by everyone after 4 months of whatever it has been of lockdown and people being unemployed, and everyone is on edge. And now this happens. And so what I'm saying is that this reaction to the pandemic has brought a society that already had a lot of tension, a lot of injustice, a lot of problems, right to the precipice, and has made us more brittle still, and has created what I think we're going to see as a de facto possibility of de facto martial law. In some ways, we are seeing that in the sense of the curfews and the lockdowns and the social tracing and the very, very intense regulation of our behaviors that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago is now going to be the norm. Whoops. The rapid economic destruction is something else that's bringing us actually into the fourth stage more rapidly. In other words, what we're seeing is an unprecedented collapse of the global economy. Now, there actually was apparently some decent economic news the other day. And the U.S. jobs numbers were actually up, surprisingly, shockingly so. But there's a lot of economic pain worldwide. And with the discovery, this is a really interesting thing to consider, that when you shut down most of the economy, you have a few professions that you realize are absolutely necessary for basic economic functioning. Growing food, groceries, getting certain supply chains, which we desperately need, obviously, medical and law enforcement, and a few things like those are the things that you have to have. And a lot of the other things society did without. And I don't know where that's going to lead precisely, but it certainly makes me think that the few industries that are considered essential are very likely going to see greater federalization and centralization of authority in the future, so that they are under control during crises, whatever kind of crises. So, but the destruction of the economic order, that we're looking at now certainly means that we're going to be looking at a very new economic order coming up. And what that order will be, well, I don't know what it will look like, but it's going to be something very different from what we're used to. The idea of nationalization and UBI, universal basic income, something that, again, was unthinkable 6 months ago, is no longer unthinkable. UBI is a critical phase in the implementation of the fourth stage of humanity. As I was saying earlier, that is when you've got a generation of people who are increasingly unemployable, and not just people at the bottom of the socioeconomic spectrum, but educated people who work and believe in the system. When there's less and less opportunity for them, and there's no jobs, well, they're going to get UBI, because what else will there be, literally? Now, I have my own solutions. I don't even know if they're genuine solutions. What I would personally love to see is a liberalization of economic capability for people to engage in businesses that they want to engage in. I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't even know if that would completely stop the lurch into this new direction that I'm seeing. But I think it would probably mitigate and help. But failing that, all you really got is putting people on UBI and making them wards of the state. And you got to keep in mind something. Old rule: whoever's paying the bills is the person calling the shot. And if the government is going to be paying your bills and providing for your very existence, they've got total control over you. You are a ward of the state. And again, this is the dependency that the fourth stage of humanity is cultivating among all people: acceptance of authority, lack of initiative, conforming, being part of this system. that doesn't allow the wiggle room that systems in the past allowed for.